Hello, my self-lovers. Welcome to another episode of the Mary's Cup of Tea podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how to motivate yourself in a self-loving way. Of course, just like with everything on this podcast, we approach things through a lens of self-compassion and self-love and really trying to tap into that place of like, I am enough. I accept myself for who I am. And because I accept myself for who I am, I can also do things that I want to do and make changes that I want to make and accomplish goals that I set out to accomplish, but no longer from a place of criticizing myself, beating myself up, comparing myself to others, being down on myself for the things that I didn't get to or couldn't get to. And I think that we all know, or at least I hope that you know, if you don't know, I'm about to tell you right now that self-criticism is not motivating. I don't know where we got this idea that talking shit to ourselves is going to miraculously help us be better humans, when in reality, all it does is make us feel like shit. And this idea has actually been extensively studied by a researcher named Dr. Kristen Neff, who has been on the podcast before. Her episode is number 32, and it's called Tools for Self-Compassion. And one of the things that was just life-changing for me to read in her book is that this exact concept that self-compassion is just as motivating, if not more so, than self-criticism. She writes in her blog, Dr. Kristen Neff writes, self-compassionate people have more intrinsic motivation in their lives, trying hard because they want to learn and grow, not because they need to impress themselves or others. And I think that that is so powerful that when it comes to motivation, it really does matter where it's coming from. Are you going to be able to get stuff done if you're using revenge as motivation? Sure, but you risk feeling empty at the end because you weren't really doing it for yourself. You were doing it to prove something to someone instead of doing things for the sake of creating meaning in your life, making yourself proud, keeping promises to yourself, really feeling fulfilled in your life. That is a totally different mindset. And I think that the biggest thing that the reason why we have this misconception that self-acceptance will somehow make us lazy or complacent is because we think that when we accept things as we are, that means we can never change them. But it's the exact opposite. Only when you accept things for how they are is when you will finally have the freedom, the capacity to begin to alter them, to take these small steps towards perhaps a different reality. And a lot of times that different reality really goes back to how you're thinking about things. It's not always about changing a certain circumstance. It's about changing your outlook, your approach to whatever that situation is. So doing stuff for the sake of keeping up with someone else, or because you feel like you have to, or because you're trying to get back at your ex from high school and make them see how great you became through the Facebook, like that's just not gonna do it. So let's talk about some other motivators and how to find them, because chances are if you're not feeling motivated, it's not because you're lazy, it's because your motivator is not good enough. And here's how I like to tap into a better, more supportive motivator. This is a technique that we use a lot in coaching, and it's a technique of course, as always, asking yourself questions, because different questions lead to new and different, fresh answers and perspectives. But this one is actually really easy and kind of annoying, but also really fun, depending on how amused you get by this kind of geeky life coaching stuff. But basically, you ask yourself why 10 times, okay? You're just going to keep asking yourself why. So, for example, I want to make more money. Why? Well, because more money will make me happier. Why? Well, it'll give me more freedom to do stuff. Why? Well, I've always wanted to go to Thailand. Why? Because travel is something I just wanted to do. I want to see the world. Why? Because I feel trapped in my circumstances. Why? Because I feel like I'm not appropriately valued for what I do. Why? Because I just do so much, it never feels like it's enough. Why? Well, because I'm not working on things that I'm proud of. So when you ask yourself why 10 times, do you see how you basically drill yourself into a different hole and discover what's really at the bottom? It seems like for a lot of people, it's not really about the money, right? It's about doing something we feel proud of and feeling adequately compensated and having a sense of freedom. And through asking why, you're tapping into all kinds of different things, and perhaps one of those things could be a better motivator. What if instead of focusing on I gotta hustle and grind to make more money, what if you focused on a different sort of motivation? For example, I want to work on things that I'm proud of. And making yourself proud is often a much better motivator than just doing something for the sake of this external result. This is the difference between outcome-based motivation and intrinsic motivation. If you're only doing things because you are expecting a certain outcome, then guess what? You leave so much more room for yourself to be disappointed if or when that outcome isn't achieved, or maybe it is achieved but not in the way you wanted it to be, or maybe you just, I don't know, didn't feel like it was all that once you did get there. And that's what happens when we're so married to the result. So this is one of those things that we constantly have to remind ourselves that we're doing things, we're doing work, we're spending time with people, not for some ulterior motive, but to feel good about it in the moment. That's a totally different type of motivation. And I feel this a lot on social media because it's one of those things where your outcome is evaluated and the feedback is given to you very, very, very quickly. As soon as you post something, instantly either a bunch of people will like it or a bunch of people will not like it, or the worst is when it's like crickets, like nobody even reacted to what I posted or this thing that I worked really, really hard on. And this is part of the reason, like this was part of the reason why I was feeling demotivated and why I decided to create this episode for you. As always, it is a pep talk for myself and it is tools that I'm developing for my personal toolbox. But sometimes when I share things on social media or I'm doing work, I almost like get caught up in that high of like having people, those dopamine reactions that are very, very intentional with the development of the technology that we're using. Feeling that is just, it can just really get to you. And on the flip side, it can really get to you when you don't experience that. So I constantly have to remind myself, like, okay, if nobody saw this, if nobody reacted to this, if nothing came from it whatsoever, would I still want to make this, write about this, film this, create this, do this? Would you still? And if your answer is yes, then like, fuck yes, go do it. If your answer is no, then maybe don't do it or evaluate why you're doing it in the first place. And I have another personal example to share related to this. I was actually up really late last night, which is probably why I'm not feeling as motivated. You know, sleep deprivation will do that to you. And even if you are sleeping, sometimes we think so much that we're always like mentally working, even if we're not physically working. Like when I'm lying in bed, if I can't turn my brain off, it does not feel like I'm resting. It almost feels worse than just being up and about. So anyway, last night I was up really late. I was watching YouTube videos. I was talking to boyfriend. I was pacing around the house. I was trying to like figure out a solution to this one problem. And the thing that I'm kind of grappling with is after hitting 1 million downloads on the podcast, I really want to for a while actually, I've really wanted to make this podcast like bigger and better and just do what I see people doing, which is like produce it on video and put it up on YouTube and invite guests in person and have these wonderful conversations. And hopefully lots of people will listen and relate and all of that. So I was driving myself absolutely nuts with like just the financial resources that takes and comparing myself to people. And I'm like, how do they do this? Well, it's because they live in LA and there's lots of podcast recording studios in LA, and maybe I should live in LA. And maybe the problem is that I live in the suburbs of Northwest Arizona, and that is why I am not successful. Do you see how like brains start to spiral and they make these excuses and they come up with these, ways to not even justify, but like almost to keep you stuck in that thinking pattern. So it very much is this self-sabotaging behavior, because this thought process of like, I need a podcast studio, it wasn't motivated by like, okay, I'm ready to grow. I want to set up a studio. I'm feeling really excited about this. Oh my goodness. How am I going to decorate it? Okay, let's think about who we need to bring in on the team to help me do this. And it didn't feel like fresh and exciting and expanding and like, just good. It just didn't feel good. It felt like I was beating myself up. I can't do it. I can't afford it. It doesn't make sense. It's not worth it. I live in buttfuck Arizona and not LA or New York. Like, it just felt like I was picking myself apart for all the things, even the things outside of my control, and always thinking that it's something with me. I'm not working hard enough, so I need to work harder and make more content and make it pretty, or else nobody will watch. Like, that kind of thought process. So anyway, I tried the why technique with myself and I wrote it out. So let me demonstrate speaking it out. I wrote, I want to make a podcast studio. Why? So that I can expand the podcast into video. Why? To reach more people. Why? Well, then I can finally do this full time. Why? That'll help me get paid to talk to people about what I'm interested in and make that conversation available for everyone to hear. Why? Well, it'll help me grow as a creator and feel important. Why? Because right now I feel like my voice is getting lost in the noise. Why? I don't know. I just don't want to add to the noise. I want to contribute something meaningful, even if it's less often, or even if it doesn't lead to this big thing. I just want to feel like I'm valued, like my voice is heard, like what I'm doing is meaningful. And I think tapping into like, I want to contribute something meaningful and not just add to the noise really helps me motivate myself by changing the approach. So now, if or when I start building out a podcast studio and thinking about making this show into video, perhaps not only does it help me feel better about it, but it also just helps me see the possibility of working with what I have instead of feeling like I'm not enough, or what I have is not enough, or what I'm doing is not enough. So I'm proud to say that as we speak, I decided to just prop up my iPhone right here and just try it. Just record the video while I'm recording the audio. And I don't have this beautiful podcast studio set up, but fuck it, whatever. Like, it's fine. It feels more meaningful this way because I'm working with what I have and the focus is on my voice and on what I have to say, not on how pretty my backdrop is and how beautiful my, I don't know, podcast studio looks and how highly produced it is. Do you see what I mean? So I hope that these examples illustrate how you can ask yourself why 10 times in